I've always been a fan of spooky stuff. Ghost stories, abandoned places, you name it. So, when I found out there was an old, rundown orphanage in my town, you better believe I wanted to check it out. The place was called Wayside Home for Children, but everyone just called it the Orphanage on Mill Road. Now, this wasn't any ordinary orphanage. It had a story. Long ago, like centuries, there was a fire that burned the place down. Most kids and staff got out, but there was one girl, Hannah, who didn't make it. They say her spirit still roams the halls, looking for a way out. Spooky, right? It was a chilly Friday night, and my best bud Mike and I decided it was the perfect time to explore the place. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, we headed over there. "Dude, this place looks even creepier at night," Mike said as we stood outside the tall, rusty gates. "Isn't it awesome?" I grinned, pulling the gates open. They creaked like something straight out of a horror movie. Perfect. We made our way to the entrance, flashlights bobbing up and down. The front door was already slightly open, like the place was inviting us in. We stepped inside and were greeted by the musty smell of old wood and decay. "Where should we start?" Mike asked, sweeping his flashlight across the dark foyer. "Let's find Hannah's room. It's supposed to be where she's most often seen," I said, my excitement growing. We wandered through the halls, our flashlights revealing peeling paint and broken furniture. Finally, we reached a room at the end of a long corridor. The door had the name Hannah carved into it. "Looks like we found it," I said, pushing the door open. It was heavier than I thought and opened with a loud groan. The room was small with faded pink walls. A small, charred bed sat in one corner, and an old doll lay on the floor, its eyes missing. Mike was visibly shaken. "Man, this is getting too real. Are we sure about this?" "Come on, where's your sense of adventure?" I picked up the doll and jokingly said, "Say hi to Hannah." Just then, the air turned ice cold, and I swear I heard a little girl giggle. I dropped the doll. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Yeah," Mike said, his eyes wide. "I think we should go." "We can't leave now. We have to see this through," I insisted, though my courage was faltering. We stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a couple of minutes. Then, out of nowhere, the door slammed shut behind us. We both jumped. "Okay, seriously, time to go," Mike said, panic creeping into his voice. But when I tried the door handle, it wouldn't budge. "It's stuck." "That's it. I'm getting out of here, door or no door," Mike said, backing away. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed in the room, singing a lullaby. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." My flashlight flickered, and I caught a glimpse of a little girl standing near the bed. She looked up, and I swear her eyes met mine. My flashlight went out completely, plunging us into darkness. "Run, Mike, run!" I screamed, gripping his arm as we stumbled toward the door. I slammed into it with all my weight, and this time it burst open. We didn't stop running until we were outside, gasping for air. Was that her?" Mike stammered. "I don't know, man, but I'm not sticking around to find out," I said, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my car keys. We sped away, leaving the orphanage, and hopefully Hannah, far behind. Weeks passed, and we didn't speak much about that night. But sometimes when it's really quiet, I still hear that lullaby playing in my head. And I can't shake the feeling that Hannah's still in there, singing her haunting tune, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to visit her forgotten room again. You know how they say some places just give off bad vibes? Yeah, well, that was the old Willowbrook Orphanage for you. Set on the outskirts of our small town, it was a run-down, creepy place that had been abandoned for years. The story goes that the place closed down due to mysterious circumstances, but no one seemed to know the details. My best friend Sarah and I decided it was the perfect place to explore on a dare. You know, the kind of thing teenagers do when they're bored and want to prove how brave they are. "Dude, are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, looking at the decaying building in front of us. "This place gives me the creeps." Come on, don't chicken out on me now, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Besides, we've got flashlights in our phones. What could go wrong? Famous last words, right? We pushed the creaking front door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. I couldn't help but imagine all the kids who once lived here and how sad and lonely they must have been. Creepy old paintings hung on the walls, and I swear the eyes seemed to follow us as we moved. Sarah shone her flashlight down the hallway. "Which way should we go?" she asked. "Let's check out the rooms on this floor first," I said, choosing the path on the right. We peeked into a few rooms, finding nothing but more dust and cobwebs. But then, when we got to what looked like an old playroom, the atmosphere changed. I can't explain it, but it suddenly felt colder, like we had walked into an icebox. And that's when we heard it, soft laughter coming from somewhere in the room. Did you hear that?" Sarah stammered. "Yeah," I replied, my voice shaky. "Let's get out of this room." We quickly left and continued down the hallway, thinking it was all in our heads. But the feeling of unease grew stronger. When we reached the end of the hall, we found an old wooden door with the words "Headmaster's Office" barely visible on it. "Should we go in?" Sarah asked. "I mean, we've come this far, right?" I turned the rusty knob, and the door creaked open. The room was dark, but what caught our attention was an old wooden desk covered in papers. I picked up a few, trying to read them, but they were too faded. And then, just as I was about to say, "Let's go back," I saw it. A picture frame face down on the desk. Curiosity got the best of me, and I picked it up. The glass was cracked, but the photo was of children, kids who must have lived in the orphanage. "Whoa, check this out," I said, showing the photo to Sarah. But as we looked, we both felt a sudden rush of cold air behind us, like someone had walked past. Instinctively, we turned around, shining our flashlights toward the back of the room. And that's when we saw her, a small figure standing in the corner facing the wall. Our hearts were pounding. It was a little girl wearing an old-fashioned dress, and her hair was a mess of tangles. "Hey, are you okay?" Sarah asked softly, taking a step closer. No response. "Hello? Can you hear us?" Just then, the little girl started to turn around, and I kid you not, her eyes were completely black. No pupils, no whites, just pitch black. And she grinned at us, a wide, eerie grin that sent chills down my spine. We didn't think twice. We bolted out of that office, slammed the door behind us, and ran as fast as we could all the way out of the orphanage. As we reached the front door, I heard it again, the soft laughter echoing behind us. We didn't stop running until we were back at our bikes, hearts pounding and out of breath. "Dude, what was that? What did we just see?" Sarah said, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," I replied, still shaken. "But I do know one thing. We are never going back there. Ever." From then on, we avoided even talking about the Meadowbrook Orphanage. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed, I can still hear that soft laughter echoing in my ears. And I know I'll never forget the black-eyed girl in the corner of that room. You see, some places are better left abandoned, because you never know what's still lingering there, waiting for curious souls to wander in.
Rain was splattering against the windshield as I drove down the almost forgotten road. The trees on either side seemed to crowd in like nosy neighbors, as if they knew where I was headed. I adjusted the rearview mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw someone else's eyes looking back. Shaking off the weird feeling, I focused on the road. "Just nerves," I muttered to myself. Finally, I saw it, the sign that read, "Meadowbrook Orphanage, Esther 1925. I pulled the car over and stared at the crumbling brick building, barely visible through the overgrown vines and weeds. Something was pulling me here, something more than just the story that Grandpa used to scare me with when I was a kid. See, according to Grandpa, there used to be an orphan girl named Emily, who looked a lot like me, and had the same name. No one ever adopted her, and one day, she just disappeared. No records, no nothing. Like she'd never existed. The place was shut down in the 60s and has been collecting dust ever since. Local legend said she still roams these halls, waiting for a family that never comes. After triple-checking my flashlight and phone were fully charged, I headed in. The front door creaked open as if announcing my entrance to the ghosts of the past. I flicked on my flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness, showing old broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. I began to explore, my footsteps creating echoes that seemed to last too long. When I reached what seemed to be a playroom, I froze. There, among the faded drawings and long-forgotten toys, was a photo. It showed a group of children, and in the back row, a little girl who looked just like me. Same curly hair, same eyes, same freckles. The name tag on her dress said Emily. My heart was pounding as I continued deeper into the building. I had to know more, had to understand what was going on. I found the office, papers strewn everywhere, a typewriter covered in a century's worth of dust. On the desk, a ledger caught my eye. I flipped it open and started scanning the pages. There it was. Emily, admitted 1957. No departure date listed. The wind howled through the broken windows, making me jump. My flashlight flickered, then went out. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered, fumbling with it, trying to turn it back on. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Why did you come here, Emily?" My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. I started backing out of the room but stopped when I heard soft footsteps, like a child's, coming closer. Another text. "Don't you remember? You belong here, Emily." I broke into a run, not looking back, not caring where I was going, just needing to get out. I finally saw the front door and bolted towards it. As I reached for the handle, it swung open on its own. I sprinted to my car, fumbled with the keys, and finally jammed them into the ignition. I didn't relax until I was miles away, and even then, my heart was still racing. When I got home, I went straight to the attic. I had to find Grandpa's old things. I needed some kind of answer. After digging through boxes, I found what I was looking for: Grandpa's journal. In shaky handwriting, he described how he had volunteered at Meadowbrook in his youth. He mentioned a little girl named Emily who was obsessed with her doppelganger, an older woman who sometimes visited. According to the journal, the girl vanished the day after my 10th birthday, the first time Grandpa told me the story. The last line in the journal made my blood run cold. "I fear that Emily's spirit is restless, trapped in a cycle, doomed to repeat her lonely existence. Her doppelganger must never return to Meadowbrook, for she will take her place and the cycle will continue." Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the attic, flipping the journal's pages wildly. When they settled, I saw my own handwriting staring back at me, as if written years ago. "I am Emily. I have always been Emily." The room went dark, and I felt myself being pulled away, back to that crumbling building, back to the echoing halls of Meadowbrook Orphanage, where I had always been, where I would always be.